Okay. Moon Knight, episode 5. It is here. We are talking about it. Okay. I'm stalling because I'm trying to figure out how I want to approach this. I am very mixed on this show overall. If anybody's been watching these reviews since day one, I have flip-flopped between brilliant and bad for most of the show. I think the earlier episodes were very interesting. They were edited well. A bad story that really didn't go for the tone the show wanted. Halfway through the season, I see what you're doing. Episode 3 was fantastic and felt very much what I think the character needs to represent for this people, for the audience it's targeting. Episode 4, not my thing. Episode 5 is fascinating to me because it is amazing that it's the penultimate episode of a show like this and ultimately serves no purpose to the villain arc of the story. It's this thing this is why television's a good format for this stuff, because you can explore the characters in greater meaning, and that's kind of impressive. So I shouldn't say my absolute favorite thing of MCU, anything that they put out, is WandaVision. And in WandaVision, you can see like the halfway point in the show where it switched to being this character study of a woman who has been through hell and back. She has been through traumatic experience after traumatic experience, and you see how it shaped her and affected her into becoming the woman she is today. And I feel like we're going to see that arc continue with her appearance in the Doctor Strange film. That to me is brilliant because it's taking a narrative device and doing something brilliant to show you the pain this character has been through. It is fascinating. This episode bears a lot of similarities to that moment in WandaVision. I will say, though, I do like it a little bit more WandaVision just because I think it just handled itself better. But this is an episode dedicated to the trauma and abuse that Mark Spector has experienced. Once again, they don't name drop dissociative identity disorder or anything related to multiple personality disorder. They don't name the ailment that Mark is experiencing. And that's something that's going to bother me no matter what happens in this show. I'm not saying you have to do it, but the fact that you can say he created this identity or he's done all these things and you don't mention it, that upsets me. That upsets me because it's like you can give us his entire journey, but you don't mention this is a mental illness. Like this is a disease that has affected him and it's something he has to cope through. It is brought on by the trauma he experienced, but you don't name it. That's not good. And that's the thing that the MCU doesn't do, where it's like, we can't explicitly say Thor's depressed because his entire family died. We can just say he's got nothing left to lose. That is something the MCU does, and I guess we'll live with it, but I'm like, really? Just say it. So we ended last episode. Big hippo lady showed up, Teoet. She is guiding the ship of Anubis and leading these souls to the realm of the dead, the field of Reeves, where they can live eternally in peace and whatever. But before that, they have to balance their scales or else they'll be lost to the sands of death. And I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. I think that's fine. I like it a lot. If it's not Anubis, that's okay. I wish it was Anubis because I think that character would be more serious than a silly hippo lady who's like, pulling out cards like, oh, I got this on file. Let me see what I can say. Weary traveler. I mean travelers. Like, I get it. You're the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You can't have a serious moment for too long. So if this episode's going to be dedicated to the abuse a man felt as a kid, yes, have your silly hippo lady struggle to tell you that you're dead. Whatever. I can get behind it. Would it be better if it was Anubis and it's like a serious moment where we're just like not making light of this people's trauma? Yeah, it would have been great. But if Anubis or whoever the fuck is locked in like one of those weird things, I don't care. It's not that big of a deal. I just don't think the hippo was necessary. I think you could have done that story with Anubis and it would work just as fine. But that's the idea of this. Before we get to the field of Reeves and we can have like literal peace in our afterlife, we have to balance our scales or else we'll be lost to the dunes that are death upon this ship. And it's cool. Like, I say the Lemaire run's my favorite run on Moon Knight, so I can't complain when we are actually doing something that emulates that book. Is it perfectly that book? No, it's not. I'm not going to complain that we are seeing something that is similar to that run, and it's just a little bit more MCU'd up, so fine, that's cool, whatever. It doesn't bother me. I can get by it. And then this episode just becomes a trauma dump. And that's fine. This could go one of two ways for anybody. It could either be like, this is really lazy writing where now we're explaining everything that leads up to this character, or it's like we're at that point in the story where we have to have these happen, and it stops being about the end of the world and starts being about the end of this man's existence. And that, to me, is a way more personal Moon Knight story. This is a thing I don't like when it comes to Moon Knight comic books or stories. He's not a character who fights the end of the world. When we have a scene later on this episode where, like, random souls are being judged and just placed into the depths for no reason, I'm like, okay, so in the real world, you have manipulated the sky, you have called upon the gods in an act of insanity, and now endless lives are being lost because of this. I don't like that side of things. This should be an intimate story about a man's struggle, and that's the stuff about this I like. So it is like it's literally a narrative, like the joke from Rick and Morty. You get it? We go to a different ship, things show up. You learn the history of this character in the MCU version, and that is completely fine. I'm going to say it too. They don't mention Jake Lockley. I know we're all waiting for it. I said it every week. It's going to be the end. It's the teaser credit that there is another personality. We'll see the sarcophagus. He's going to burst out, have a cute little mustache. We're going to call it flat done there. We don't need to mention that at all. We just have to get on with our lives, and we'll have to see what's coming from this story. So before Mark or Steve can actually get their eternal rest in the Field of Reeves, they have to learn to balance the scales and stop them from shaking. So they get their two hearts that aren't full of anything. How are they going to do that? They have to be honest with each other. And it leads to some history. Is this perfectly accurate to the history of the character? No, but what really is in the MCU? It is an interesting... I like it, okay? I don't think it was bad. I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, this could really bother me. And sometimes it does, where I think it cuts away too much from the intensive emotion and sends us back to the psychiatric ward where Mark or Steven is talking to Harrow. I don't think you need to have those moments in there because we already know what's happening. We already know. You've already explained the idea of what's going on here, and your audience isn't smart enough to grasp that. I'm sorry, but they're not. I get it. I know what's going on here. When you cut back to Harrow in those offices, we're meant to believe that still everything Mark is thinking about is fake. But we know what we're watching. Your audience knows what they're watching, and they're just going to be annoyed by those scenes, so there's no need to really have them. It's just going to come across as painfully annoying. I'm fine with it. I don't think it's necessary, and I think you could tell a story just as fine without them. But the fact that we do cut back to Mark speaking with Harrow in the offices, and after he has his freak out because he doesn't want to talk about something, or when Steven learns the truth of his existence and he comes back to Harrow, I understand why those are there, because they could be played up for a certain element, and that's fine. But then you can't have those moments and then cut back to the stuff with the hippo on the boat being attacked by mummies. I'm sorry, you just can't. Because then that doesn't work for what we're doing here, because now we know that that's not real, and it never was real, and it doesn't feel real because of what we're doing elsewhere. That's just the thing. Your audience is only going to be annoyed by those because they don't understand what you're trying to say with it. It's fine. We can all move past it because it's okay. And then we get the history. So one of my biggest problems with this history is it has nothing to do with Layla. The character's not in the episode. May is not in this episode at all. Why wouldn't you show her broken, strained relationship with Mark and how that would affect Steven becoming prominent? Interesting, because we don't actually see any struggle in that relationship. You don't see Mark distance himself. We'll get to it. So this episode is a lot of just revisiting your past, and that's okay. I'm fine if that. WandaVision did it fine. The past in here is pretty impressive. First off, Mark Spector is Jewish. He's Jewish. Everybody who was upset he wouldn't be or was thinking they'd look past that, he is Jewish. They really specify that in the episode, and that's really cool. It's one day and his family wants to have a nice dinner, but him and his brother want to go play in their cave. What does that mean? Who's to say? They have a cave they want to play in. They're going to go to this cave, but it starts raining, and as they are in this cave, it starts to flood, and we're presuming that Randall drowns. Okay. Mark Spector kills his brother, is what we're saying here, and his mother completely shuts down and doesn't want to talk to him. She yells at him, she screams at him because of the death of his brother, and we get some scenes where it's his birthday and his mom's like, you were always afraid of him, or he was always better than you, and you will never be anything like him. She completely distances herself from Mark, and thus abuse starts, because when Mark wants to find his own life, suddenly he can't. Suddenly he is trapped in this world where he's hated and unloved, and one day he locks the door to his bedroom, and suddenly we know his mom's going to come in to attack him. And in that moment, we see Steven Grant is formed. He's looking at the poster for Tomb Hunter, something like Tomb Dusters, something like that. And suddenly the dissociative identity disorder kicks in, and he creates the identity of Steven Grant within himself. And he gets his ass whooped by his mom. He gets abused by his mother, thus starting the trauma that is his life with Steven. I am impressed they did this, honestly, and I am more impressed they don't play it for jokes. We get jokes of the hippo like, doop-de-doop, I don't know how to be the death god. But what we do get here is brilliant. Not brilliant because the child's being abused. It's brilliant because, like, you're actually letting this character have trauma that he can't really heal from. And you see how he grows up with that. When he's old enough to leave, he leaves, and his father's like, you have to stay. Please stay, my son. I can't lose you too. But it's too late, and Mark leaves, and he joins the Marines. They actually say he joins the Marines, but after some shady shit goes down in an operation, he gets some mercenary work, and this is where we learn that he actually was with Bushman. So we get Bushman by name. We don't see him, which is fine. I wish we did, because I think it's necessary. But it's also not saying Bushman is dead. So if we do more of this, it could establish that as coming back. We could also establish through this that Randall could come back too, because Randall Spector does become a character in the Moon Knight mythos. Not one a lot of people enjoy, but there's something you could do there. I think Jed McKay is actually bringing him back in the Strange book, so that's kind of fun. It's interesting. And we see how not only was Mark abused and manipulated and attacked by his mother, but the day he betrays Bushman and he is left for dead, he is manipulated and abused by Khonshu. Just a feat of abuse and intolerance. And we don't see Mark die at the foot of Khonshu's statue. What we see is he is alone. Marlene did not bring him there. Nobody actually put him there. He crawled there himself, and the god's like, yo, you look like you're pretty badass. I could save your life if you want to do crazy shit for me, be like my fist of vengeance. He's like, yeah. And you see Mark's essentially resurrection into becoming that. It's a beautiful shot. It looks very cool. And I really wish, that moment, in particular, that moment where you see the three focused points of Mark coming to life, the resurrection where his eyes are glowing, the uniform is draping over him, the skull of Khonshu is looming over him, and on the other side is the actual statue of Khonshu. I wish the show was more of that moment, like shots that look like that feel as intense and powerful and broken as that. And you see Steven is watching this, and suddenly he realizes a couple things. He realized he was not the prominent personality. He was created as a block for Mark so he wouldn't have to experience trauma or deal with these things. And because of that, Mark let Steven be happy. He didn't know his mother died. He wasn't allowed to know his mother died. And I'm like, that is some impressive shit you're dealing with there. That is a really beautiful use of trauma. And it's weird to say beautiful. But when you are writing a character who establishes their own trauma and is finding ways to cope with it, including making another person, I love that Mark is letting him be happy in his, obliviousness, because that's kind of tragic in its own way. And you see Marcus like, I created you so I wouldn't have to do this, so I wouldn't have to feel these things. And you don't feel them. You don't know anything that's happening to her. You don't have to be burdened by this world or know any of this crazy stuff that's happening. You just exist. You just are. You can just do it all. And that's a really nice moment. It's very beautiful, very powerful. We see this scene where Mark is standing outside of the funeral for his mother. He's looking at his dad in the window, and he breaks into tears and cries. And thus we see the primary moment that Stephen Grant took over. He's pretending to call his mother on the phone, and it is powerful. It's very well done. It is handled with such maturity and respect that you almost don't realize this is a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because you don't get this often. You get it with WandaVision a bit, where you see Wanda dealing with her trauma and learning about her life. These moments are rare and far few, and it's very impressive, and I'm just impressed that we had the guts to try it. It's powerful. It's heartbreaking, and this is where I have been very skeptical on Oscar Isaac's acting throughout the show. He's been great. He's been great because most of the other actors in this universe aren't, so he just looks better by comparison. But you watch the scenes where he is breaking down, where he is yelling, where he is crying, where he is broken and manipulated and scared and frightened and afraid and jovial. He is fantastic. He is so electric and beautiful and breathtakingly doing these broken scenes of a man so afraid of his own destiny, afraid of what he has become, that he closes himself off from himself, that he hides himself from himself and separates the identities into something broken. I know his brother was on set doing like the actual physicality for when he is like reacting to himself as Mark or Steven, but he's playing against himself really well. And you see the way Steven is just looking at this broken man like, you cannot blame yourself for anything you experienced. This is hard. You were a child. She hurt you. You were manipulated by not just your parents, by not just your mother, but by a God who abused your mind, by your own ideology of who you are. You are not a bad man, regardless of the things you have done. And there is some really nice closure in there. And you could look at this on a metatextual level where it's like, hey, now that we do all the intense emotional stuff with Mark, we don't have to have his story matter if he appears again in the MCU, so he can just become like our vigilante character. You could look at it like that. I know I am a little bit, because of course they would. Or you could look at this like they actually had a story to tell about this man so afraid of himself that he split his personality in half, and he blocked off his memories from one person and let himself deal with the pain, so at least a part of him could be happy with the illusion of what his life had been. That's kind of impressive. That's kind of tragic and beautiful and traumatic and very creative. And it's a very good use of the Stephen Grant character. I find he's not a billionaire. You don't need him to be. He is just a smart guy who manifested this identity for himself by being a smart archaeologist. It's very creative. And having Mark actually have trauma is very cool. It's like something that was necessary for this story to matter again. I dig that a lot. It's very tragic. Very well done for every actor involved. The sadness in his father's eyes where he's trying to get the mother to help him. The way Mark is just accepting of this fate, and it's like, maybe I deserve this. Maybe I actually did get my brother killed. It's powerful. Do I think Randall's dead? Probably not. I don't. That's just where I'm at. But we're not talking about that now. As far as Mark is concerned, he was responsible for his brother's death, and it affected his mother to the point where he could never be happy. And as he talks about this with Steven, suddenly they realize their scales are becoming more balanced than ever. And the fact that they're opening up and talking to each other is helping. They are attacked by the night creatures of the mummies and the sands of time. They're fighting each other off. It's looking very cool. Very nice fighting. Steven finally gets some good looks in, and he's just like, yeah, I prefer cricket to baseball. Very funny stuff. And in an effort to save the day, Steven sacrifices himself by saving Mark, falling into the sands, essentially dying. And Mark's finally able to go to the field of Reeves, where he wakes up in a field, broken, scared, and alone. And it's a powerful ending to this episode. And that's what I want. Again, I understand we can't fully do all the psychiatric stuff. We can, sedate Mark and show you that he's going crazy. But now we know it's not real. So that's fine. And giving us an episode where a character can explore their trauma, they can see a room full of the dead bodies of the people they killed. They can remember the day that they lost their mother, the day they lost their brother, the day they created this identity for themselves so they didn't have to deal with anything. That's impressive for a show like this. The fact that it took itself that seriously and wanted to try to do that is very serious. I am very impressed by that. And as hesitant as I have been on this show, there are certain moments where I haven't really liked it. This one was electric. It was just intense and gripping in ways we really needed for this. I am impressed with what it did. It sold me on a lot of this show, and I'm super impressed with what we saw and how it's been acting. And I think we got a winner on our hands. I think we're actually heading in the right direction now. Mark's obviously not going to be dead forever. He'll probably be resurrected again. Steven's going to come back because he's too favorite of a character. We can't have 3 personalities in there, so I'm assuming he'll be back for something. He has to be because we can't lose the Mr. Knight suit, but maybe as a coping mechanism to figure out how he's going to fix Steven, Mark's going to create Jake as the ultimate badass personality so he can get time to heal, and we can just unleash the beast that is Jake Lockley. That could be what happens, but we'll have to wait and see. But as it stands, strong episode that did a lot of stuff right. Let a character deal with their trauma where it didn't have to make jokes. And as much as the silly hippo bothered me, I get it. That's just every character in the MCU, so I'm fine with it. I'm completely fine with it. So that's going to do it for this review of Moon Knight Episode 5. Now, thank you guys for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. As always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.
Demon, face the vengeance of the Moon Knight.